Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. And welcome to our 2024 guide to the Paladin in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
Paladin is a class that gets to do a whole lot at the table. We're going to be looking at all of their class features, their subclasses, their ability scores, spells, feats, and a whole lot more. There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
Paladins invoke some classic heroic archetypes in fantasy, from the knight in shining armor to the valiant cavalier to the dark knight. All of these are possible with the Paladin, and though when you are choosing to play one in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, often your weapon choices are going to define the way that your Paladin is going to play. So you might want to look at one of the following classic archetypes to look at in that respect.
You could play a Paladin as a dual wielder and fight with 2 melee weapons to make extra attacks on your turn, perhaps donning lighter armor and being a little more dexterity focused.
But if you're more driven towards the Paladin in the protector role, you might want to be a shield bearer type build, a character who wields a single weapon in one hand and a shield with another to act as a bit of a battlefield controller and protect their allies from harm.
Or you might just be here to smite your enemies down with a large two-handed weapon, in which case the two-handed option is going to be the way to go to deal brutal damage to your foes.
Now, Paladins can embody so many different character archetypes beyond this. They can be sacred protectors, they can be questing knights, mounted cavaliers, holy healers, heroic leaders, wrathful templars, or anything in between. They're really fantastic for players who like this interesting balance of melee damage dealing, but also a defensive-oriented playstyle, a way to buff and protect your allies at the same time, even healing them, and also being a character that can act as a party face with a high charisma and lots of great role-playing opportunities. Paladins have their connections to their oaths and the gods, knightly orders and organizations, which means that there's a lot that you can connect your character to, both mechanically and in terms of role-playing, to really get a great experience of essentially everything D&D has to offer, which is a really great way that if you want it all, you want to hit things with swords, you want to cast spells, you want to talk to people, you want to have some good skill choices in there. Paladins kind of get to play every aspect of the game in one cohesive package. Because there's so many different ways that you can go with your Paladin, if you're playing one for the first time, you might really want to consider focusing on one of these more narrow archetypes before exploring all the options that are available to you.
Let's look at the core traits of the Paladin. Right away, their ability scores that you're going to want to focus on are strength and charisma for most builds. Most Paladins are going to be wearing heavy armor, perhaps carrying a shield, and they're also generally going to be the face of the party with charisma-based spellcasting. So strength and charisma are your tickets to that path.
As martial frontliners, Paladins have a D10 hit die, which you can bolster by having a good constitution score as well. You might be noticing already that this means that Paladins want to have good strength, charisma, and constitution, which really drives them towards these ability scores and really makes it challenging a little bit when we get to the ability score allotment.
They have decent saving throw proficiencies in wisdom and charisma, which I think is pretty great because a lot of the most debilitating effects in the game are wisdom saves and charisma saves. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be the greatest at dodging out of a fireball, but mental control abilities, you got it.
This is only half the picture, though, because Paladins have an extra tool in their class features that is really going to bolster their saving throws, and which we'll talk about shortly. When it comes to their skill proficiencies, Paladins get to pick 2 from athletics, insight, intimidation, medicine, persuasion, or religion. And then you get to combine these with the 2 skills that you get from your background and maybe other skills that you might get from your species. I find that in general with Paladins, I generally gravitate towards athletics and persuasion as my skill picks because, again, with strength and charisma as our primary attributes, athletics means that we're going to have something to do in exploration scenarios, whether that's climbing, jumping, or engaging with the environment. And persuasion is going to be our front line in social situations.
If you are going a different route than the strength-based paladin, I personally like insight, or if I'm really playing into the role-playing aspects of what it means to be a paladin, I might pick religion, but I do find in our games religion doesn't come up that often. But it might in
Intelligence
yours.
isn't going to be a strong suit for your paladin either.
No.
Yeah. But paladins do get everything when it comes to weapons and armor. So you get simple martial weapons, light, medium, heavy armor, and shields. You got it all. So take up whatever tools you need to smite evil.
As we move to the Paladin class features, right away at first level, we're going to gain Lay on Hands, immediately giving our Paladin a healing feature. This gives you a pool of healing equal to 5 times your Paladin level. So it's going to level up with us, and you're always going to have this pretty good pool of hit points that you can divvy out to your party or yourself. The pool replenishes when you finish a long rest, and as a bonus action, you can touch a creature to heal them by drawing points from the pool. You can also expend 5 points from the pool to remove the poisoned condition.
So points from the pool turn into hit points on a 1-to-1 ratio, but when you do use the feature to remove a condition, you don't get any healing from that. Now, eventually, Lay on Hands does get upgraded to Restoring Touch at level 14, which also lets you remove blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, paralyzed, or stunned for 5 hit points from the pool for each condition. So bearing that in mind that yes, you can remove multiple conditions simultaneously with one use of Lay on Hands if someone in your party has been poisoned and stunned and frightened, but that's going to cost you 5 hit points per condition. Now, of course, by that level, you've got a pretty beefy pool to use from, so it's pretty reliable for that purpose.
Paladins are also going to gain spellcasting at first level. They are half casters. This means that they have access to spells of first level and eventually gain access to 5th level spells. Charisma is going to be their spellcasting ability, and their spell saving throw DC is 8 plus proficiency bonus plus charisma modifier, and their spell attack bonus is their charisma modifier plus their proficiency bonus.
The Paladin features table on PHB 110 is going to show you how many spell slots and spells prepared that your Paladin gets for each level, and you get all your spell slots back on a long rest. Also, each time you do take a long rest, you can change one of your prepared spells. So you do have a little bit of flexibility with your spell list, but not quite as much as, say, a cleric or a druid or a wizard, who they get to kind of change all of their prepared spells every long rest. You're also not as hemmed in as, say, a sorcerer or warlock, who doesn't get to change them except when you level up. But you are kind of committed to the spells that you choose, although your Paladin subclass is going to grant you additional spells prepared which don't count against this number. That said, Paladin spell slots are a pretty precious resource, because even at very high levels, you're not going to have that many of them. In most cases, you've only got like 1 or 2 of your highest level slot, and it's possible to burn through them very quickly as a paladin.
This is why I generally try to steer my choices, and we're going to look at spells later, but I try to pick ones that I think are either concentration spells that are going to impact an entire combat encounter, or very impactful single-use spells that if you use at the right moment could change a combat encounter in your favor or a different scenario. But you're really looking for those impact spells. I tend to not steer towards spells that, if I waste a spell slot on something that doesn't really do a whole lot in the game, those more niche spells, not going to worry about them.
Now, also at level 1, you get Weapon Mastery. Paladins get a lot at level 1.
Yeah.
They can use the Mastery property, which are outlined on PHB 214, with 2 weapons of your choice. Every time you take a long rest, you can change what your masteries are, but you don't gain additional masteries as you gain levels. This means that the 2 masteries that you have are kind of what you are locked into for at least for each day. Whereas other classes like barbarians and fighters get extra masteries and can have a variety of weapons. As a paladin, you're kind of going to want to pick 2 weapons and hone in on that.
You can switch up what weapons they are every time, but you're only ever going to have 2. So if you start with, let's say, a sword and an axe, and then along the way you pick up a magic mace, You can retrain to have weapon mastery in the mace and toss aside the axe maybe. But unfortunately, if you're something like a dual wielder who also has a short bow on their back, you can't actually get both of the swords that you're wielding and the short bow if you have different swords.
Yeah. Now, to help out with this a little bit, you do get a fighting style feat at 2nd level of your choice. Or instead of taking a fighting style, you can select the Blessed Warrior option, and you learn 2 cantrips of your choice from the Cleric spell list. So for this, it's going to really be based on what archetype you're going with. So we'll cover what feats you might want to choose when we talk about all the feats later on, but it's pretty much going to match up with your weapon choices.
Also at 2nd level, you're going to gain Paladin Smite. This is probably the most iconic feature of the Paladin. Everybody loves smiting as a Paladin. It's what they do best. You always have the Divine Smite spell prepared, and you can cast it once per long rest without expending a spell slot. So you do not have to choose Divine Smite as a spell that you're picking. You just have it. And a free casting of it once per long rest is pretty good.
Yeah, Divine Smite is probably worth talking about now because this is such an iconic Paladin spell. It is cast as a bonus action when you hit with one of your melee attacks, and it just applies 2d8 extra radiant damage on the hit. What's cool about Divine Smite is that you don't have to cast it before you make the attack. You get to cast it and expend the bonus action when the attack hits. And what's a cool move that you can actually do with this is to maximize what you get out of Divine Smite is actually waiting until you crit to use it, because then all those dice are going to get increased with the critical hit, and you'll get a maximize the impact from it. Of course, the free casting that you get of Divine Smite is always at the lowest level. You can upcast Divine Smite to deal additional damage. So that's where, like, if you're a high level paladin, you got a 4th or 5th level slot, and you're coming up against a demon lord or a lich, and you roll that crit, you're like, yeah, I could ruin your day right now by putting the crit on the Divine Smite. So that can be really worthwhile if you really want to ruin the day of an undead or fiend, because you get the extra damage there as well. On the flip side, because Divine Smite is cast as a bonus action, paladins have a lot of things to do with their bonus action, like dual wielding or using lay on hands or much more. So depending on your fighting style, Divine Smite might be a mainstay of your damage, especially for those that are using 2-handed weapons or sword and shield, whereas dual wielders might rely less on Divine Smite, depending on, again, what their strategy is. It's a great way to get immediate burst damage, but it can be resource intensive if you're using Divine Smite every single turn.
Also at 2nd level, you're going to gain your Channel Divinity feature. You can channel the power of the outer planes, and each time you use your Channel Divinity, you get to choose the effect. One of the effects that all paladins have access to is Divine Sense. It allows you to detect celestials, fiends, and undead as a bonus action for the next 10 minutes or until you are incapacitated. You know the location of any creature of those types within 60 feet of yourself, and you know which of those types it is. Your subclass will also grant you an additional option, so whatever subclass you pick, each one will give you a unique and thematic Channel Divinity.
All paladins also get an extra option for Channel Divinity at level 9 called Abjure Foes. This is a magic action that they can use to frighten a number of enemies equal to their charisma modifier that are within 60 feet of them. And those foes then are frightened if they fail a wisdom save for 1 minute or until they take damage. And while they're frightened, they are effectively dazed, so they can only move, take an action, or a bonus action. Abjure Foes is a really cool power for battlefield control because it severely hampers a bunch of your enemies and and it works on anybody regardless of creature type. Clerics have their turn undead that only works on undead, whereas Abjure Foes is going to work on humanoids, it's going to work on demons, it's going to work on basically anybody that's not being immune to being frightened, straight up.
One thing that you should note, and this is going to apply here and also when we get into the spellcasting and a few of the other class features, likely your paladin is going strength or maybe even dexterity as their main stat, with charisma being their second highest stat. This means that unlike primary spellcasters, your saving throw DC might not be as high as a main spellcaster. For that reason, keep in mind that when creatures get something like a wisdom saving throw, there is a better chance that they could overcome this. So be careful on when you choose to use this. If you have a bunch of foes that you're pretty sure have really high wisdom, might not be the right time to try to frighten everybody. But if you have a bunch of minions around, perfect time.
Now, your paladin starts off with 2 uses of Channel Divinity, and you regain all the uses of Channel Divinity on a long rest, and you get 1 use back every short rest. Starting at 11th level, you gain a 3rd use. In practice, what this means is that you can very reliably use your Channel Divinity power once per battle. Whether that is Divine Sense, Abjure Foes, or your subclass option. Depending on your subclass, the subclass Channel Divinities, which we'll talk about when we get to the subclasses, are really good. And in most cases, you kind of want to use them every battle because they're so good. And so you have enough uses that between short rests and your initial uses, you usually can. It's just that if you're using it more than once per battle, that's where you're going to kind of start running out of uses, right? So like if you want to use your subclass power and Abjure Foes, you might find yourself without it in the next battle. So that's the best way to kind of think about how to ration it.
As usual, we're going to be gaining an ability score improvement or a feat at 4th level, and then again at 8th, 12th, and 16th level, with an epic boon feat starting at 19th level.
We'll talk about this a little more when we get into the feat selection, but paladins love feats, but they also love increasing their ability scores. So your choices for your ability score improvements are actually going to be really, really tight for your paladin. And you gotta, it's a difficult choice.
I promise you're not going to get everything you want on your paladin. I don't think there's a way to get every feat and every ability score where I want them to be. You have to pick and choose, and you have to be really specific in your choices.
Paladins also get extra attack, like all martial classes at level 5, letting them attack twice instead of once when you take the attack action on your turn. Usual caveats here apply. You don't get extra attack on reaction-based attacks or bonus action-based attacks, but you can always use one of the attacks to grapple or shove the target. Bear in mind that because Divine Smite is a bonus action, you can only apply Divine Smite to one of your attacks. What's nice about this, though, is that it does mean that you're going to be reliably able to apply Divine Smite, because if your first attack misses and your second attack hits, you Divine Smite on the second attack. Remember, you don't have to declare the Divine Smite until you know whether the attack hits or misses.
Also at 5th level, you're going to gain Faithful Steed. Now you have the Find Steed spell always prepared. Similar to the Paladin Smite, you can cast it once per day without expending a spell slot. So Paladins all have the access to ride a steed of their choice into battle. Keep in mind, this doesn't need to be a horse. Could be a moose, could be a pig, a war pig, could be a giant frog, a badger, a hamster.
Your DM might let you get really creative with reflavoring it.
A seahorse.
Yeah. The steed at higher levels might not be the most durable creature to bring into combat with you, but it can be useful for getting around. Although if you do want to go the mounted combatant route, there are ways that you could build your character to be a little bit more robust with that. At level 6, you get what is possibly my favorite feature on the Paladin class, and almost certainly going to be your party's favorite feature of your character, and probably your DM's least favorite feature on your character, and that is Aura Protection. Aura Protection creates an emanation that goes out from you up to 10 feet. You, as well as all of your allies in the aura, get to add a bonus to all saving throws equal to your charisma modifier. So this boosts your own saving throws up by your charisma mod, and then your allies, as long as they stick close to you, they get that too. What's really cool about this is that this is going to bolster some of what would otherwise be weak-looking saves for your paladin. You're adding your charisma modifier to your con save, to your dex save. It's going to mean that you are adding your strength and charisma modifier to strength saves. You're adding your charisma and wisdom to your already proficient wisdom saves. And it basically means that you're getting to add your charisma modifier to your own charisma saving throws twice. So your paladin is just going to have an absolutely cranked charisma saving throw bonus. And then any of your allies that are close to you get to benefit from it as well.
What I really like about this is some of the worst saving throws that you have. It always feels better to roll a die and add a 1 than it does to subtract a 1.
Yeah.
So my intelligence, which usually I would have a -1 in for myself, I now have a +2, which is a small number, but it feels way different when you're rolling an intelligence saving throw to have a +2 behind you, rather than knowing that whatever you roll on the die, you're subtracting 1 from. It's just, you're not going to have a saving throw that is in the negatives.
Yeah. It's really, really sweet. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people like maxing out their charisma on their paladins, because adding a meaty +5 bonus to all saves is so good.
And it's one of the rare cases where even if your enemy has fireball, you might want to gather around the paladin because it could save your life.
Yeah. Just remember that it shuts off if you're incapacitated. So if you do get stunned, or you're paralyzed, or you are knocked unconscious, it doesn't work. Other thing to note is that if you happen to be in a party with 2 paladins, multiple auras don't stack. Creatures can only benefit from 1 aura protection at a time, which is usually the best one.
So the all paladin party isn't going to get like a
+10,
15,
30.
No. Unfortunately, they aren't invincible.
Now, there's 2 augmentations to the Aura of Protection that happen. At level 10, Aura of Courage makes you and all allies in the Aura just immune to being frightened. And at level 18, you get Aura Expansion, which increases your aura to 30 feet. Some Paladin subclasses also boost your aura in certain ways.
At 11th level, you get Radiant Strikes. Now your melee weapons and unarmed strikes deal an additional 1d8 extra radiant damage. So even if you're not Divine Smiting, your attacks still kind of have a smite attached to them.
And this 1d8 extra damage applies to every single one of your attacks. So if you're a dual wielder who's attacking 4 times per turn, that's a lot of extra d8s. Yeah. So let's dive into the ability scores that we want to start off with our Paladin. The way that I look at this is there's 2 places to start. You want to go with the traditional strength-based Paladin build, or if you're going for a dual wielder Paladin build, you could go with a dexterity-based build. Let's look at how these 2 compare.
So let's start by looking at kind of the outlier here, the dual wielder option. Now, for the dual wielder, as opposed to most paladins that are going to focus on strength, you're going to focus on dexterity. You're probably going to wear light armor, and you're going to want a 15 in dex, and you're still going to want to put that 15 in charisma for your spellcasting. You're still going to be the party face. We recommend putting a +1 into charisma beyond that. After that, you're going to want a good constitution, obviously, and everything else you can kind of drop, probably choosing 1 ability. For me, it's always intelligence, that you just put an 8 in.
Yeah. Now, the shield bearer two-hander, they're going to want to go with strength as their primary stat. So you're basically going to flip your strength and dex here, because you're going to wear heavy armor instead. With the shield bearer two-hander, we also have shown the option here of flipping your con and charisma and going for a con of 15 base and putting your +1 there to get it out to 16, and then starting with 14 charisma. Again, these are all options. You could actually flip the con and charisma for the dual wielder build as well, going with a 15 or 16 con effectively and a 14 charisma going into it. These are kind of the big decisions, basically. It's like, are you going to put your 15 in either strength or dex, and then are you going to put the 15 and the +1 in either con or chat? All possible combinations of these will work well for your paladin. It just really comes down to a couple decisions. Do you want to, and in fact, I'm also going to say you can play a strength-based dual wielder and it works too. Just that the reason why you go with dexterity on the dual wielder build is because you're going to get the higher dex score for the purposes of boosting your initiative. which is pretty sweet. Because you're mostly going to be using finesse or light weapons anyways with the dual wielder, so you might as well go a bit dex-based. But you can be a strength-based dual wielder. That does actually work too. So essentially, you can mix and match around these things, essentially knowing that int and wisdom are not going to be important for your paladin at all. And points that this is the difficult thing with the paladin in general, is that points that you put in int and wiz are points that you're not putting into dex, strength, con, or cha. And in fact, if you really want to min-max it with your paladin, you could drop your wisdom even further to get another bump up in one of your other stats, knowing that your charisma is going to make up for that negative in the wisdom saving throw the other way around.
There is also a weird case here where you put your +2 in charisma because you want to focus more on the paladin spellcasting. I think that is a trickier build to pull off. So just be aware, if this is your first time playing a paladin, I wouldn't worry too much about that. But there are some interesting builds out there that use a full charisma option, mostly involving multi-classing or picking somehow like dabbling in other spells from other classes.
Yeah, usually it's either finding a way to make charisma your attack stat by using a spell like Shillelagh, or by taking up the Warlock Pact of the Blade through multi-classing.
For your backgrounds, if you're going with the Dex build, you may want to look at the Charlatan, the Entertainer, or the Wayfarer, which is going to grant you Skilled for Charlatan, Performer for Entertainer, and Lucky for Wayfarer. Kind of interesting background choices. A Charlatan Paladin is a unique option there.
Yeah.
An Entertainer Paladin, I guess you could be like a gladiator or sort of like
kind of get that like warrior poet bard thing.
Yeah.
Performer feat, like the performer feat is a great way to like inspire your allies too. That's very much the inspirational type paladin.
I mean, a performer doesn't need to be somebody playing an instrument. You could be somebody who just like has religious passages and stuff like that you like kind of promote your oath through speech or poetry. And then Lucky, of course, a Wayfarer Paladin, I think, is
Questing Knight.
Your prime choice.
Yeah. You can also go with, if you want things that are just going to boost your strength and con, you can go with Farmer, which is going to get you tough, make you even more hit point tanky, or you could also go with Soldier for Savage Attacker.
I think that the tough farmer who swears an oath to avenge their crops, I don't know, it's fun. There's a fun idea there.
And I mean, that's where we come into species here, because I think of the tough farmer paladin as a dwarf.
See,
right?
It's interesting. Paladin is another one of those classes that I always picture as a human first.
Yeah.
But there are really cool paladins out there. I think the dwarf paladin is really awesome. I think that there are now that we've kind of opened up the idea of a paladin, I actually think that there's a lot of more unique ways that you can go, because with the dexterity-based paladin, every species can don heavy armor and run into battle, but there's some that I just picture as being more of the sort of like not heavy armored paladins.
Yeah, like gnomes, halflings, and elves.
Yeah,
I think go perfectly for that.
With the dexterity paladin. And actually, for me personally, there's the Dark Crystal series that had Hup, who I picture as a paladin. His weapon was a wooden spoon, but boy was he a paladin. He swore an oath to protect his friends, and he beat people with that wooden spoon all through the show. So there's a lot of imagination that you can actually bring into what a paladin is now. It's less defined by the armored knight and more defined by the oath that they swear.
But leaning into those archetypes, I think the Aasimar is definitely like the angelic avenger archetype, right? I also think that these kind of became really popular in 4th edition, but like the Dragonborn Paladins of Bahamut also like, because Bahamut really embodies like that lawful good, justice-seeking archetype. And so that's really cool with Dragonborn in particular. I also think the idea of like Tiefling Hell Knights is really fun.
But you could just as easily go with like an Orc Vengeance Paladin. Feels really on point. It depends what they're swearing their oath to. An Orc being like, somebody killed my family and I'm going to get vengeance on them is like a very orc thing to do, in my opinion, to be like, time to put on the armor, pick up the sword, and kill everybody who wronged me. Why not?
Yeah, so again, I think that there's a lot of fun to be had. Of course, yes. For me, humans and dwarves kind of rise to the top of like the iconic like dwarven defender paladin, or like the human questing knight. The Azamar is the angelic avenger, but I do really like the idea of like the elf paladin, the halfling paladin, especially with the options for dual wielding on a dexterity based build. Those feel really, really appropriate. So again, I think mechanically speaking, it's really tempting to go Dragonborn for the flight. That's super, super useful in here. I think that the Azamar almost feels like doubling down on a lot of paladin abilities too, because it gives you like more healing, more resistances, which is really awesome. I do think that the other kind of fun things about the elves that are getting cantrips, these are clever ways of getting of being able to do some fun things with your paladin as well, or having like a ranged attack.
The only species that we didn't mention, so I'm going to mention it, is Goliath, who I think makes a great two-handed paladin, like a Goliath running in with a giant sword, smiting their foes. It's pretty great.
So speaking of the two-handed sword, when it comes to weapon selection and your weapon masteries, the greatsword is pretty iconic. For a paladin, but you might also want to look at a pike, particularly if you're going to go the polar master route, because that lets you push enemies around. You can go with a maul or lance. The dwarf paladin with a maul.
Even the Goliath with the maul.
Yeah, drop the hammer.
And the lance is great if you are going that mounted combatant route.
Yeah.
Trident, I don't know. I ride a seahorse, throw a trident.
Yeah.
For the shield bearer, you could go with the battle axe, the axe and shield. Great. The long sword is iconic, obviously. The sword and shield can't go wrong. Warhammer for push, or trident again. So battle axe allows you to topple. The longsword has the sap property, and then push and topple again with the trident.
And if you're going with a dual wielder, the iconic combo here for most 5th edition dual wielders is going with a short sword for Vex and a scimitar for Nick. That's going to get you the bonus action attack. Normally, you have to spend a bonus action to make your extra attack. Nick makes that part of your main action, so you can get 3 attacks in and a smite. But as we build on top of that with some of the other feats and other class features, you can do other things there as well. With the dual wielder, because you're usually combining Vex and Nick, that's all your options there. But if you decide that maybe you don't need Vex for some reason, because paladins have lots of ways of generating advantage on their attack rolls, you can just go with scimitar and wield 2 scimitars, and get a short bow with Vex for when you need it. The dual wielder, ironically, is they kind of consume their options there. Now, if you did go with a strength-based dual wielder, instead of going with Vex, you could go with an axe for topple, which would be cool too. So this is where we connect it to the feats. So the dual wielder paladin build, the essence of this is to take the 2-weapon fighting style, combine that with the dual wielder feat and the Nick weapon mastery, effectively, as well as extra attack, means this. Your paladin, with your action, gets to make their attack with their main weapon, and then they get to make a Nick attack as part of that same action. When you have the dual wielder feat, what this also does is it means that you can attack again with a bonus action, getting you a 3rd attack. And if you have extra attack, you get 1 more attack as part of your main action, getting you a 4th attack. So, or baseline, you are attacking 3 times with your action, and then you've got another attack with your bonus action. 4 attacks, basically. As you saw earlier with like a feature like Radiant Strikes, getting to make 4 attacks that add a d8 to all of them is a lot of extra damage.
Remember that your Paladin Smite feature is a bonus action to cast. So if you are going to use that, you do have 3 opportunities to use it. It just means that you would be giving up your 4th potential attack for additional damage, which in many cases could be worth it because the 4th attack is a chance to hit for decent damage. If you're at the point where you are fighting a fiend or an undead, and maybe you have the ability to upcast your Paladin Smite, then you can actually use that to greater effect to make sure that you deliver that damage rather than taking the chance to.
On the other hand, the dual wielder bonus action attack doesn't cost you any spell slots or anything to use. And it is the opportunity to stack it with other spells and other effects. So the dual wielder feat is not necessarily it's not necessarily the case that like the extra attack from dual wielder is always better than Divine Smite, or Divine Smite is always better than the extra attack. It is situational. And so ultimately having the choice to do both is part of what makes the dual wielder so flexible.
Now, the other feat that you might want to consider is Defensive Duelist. It is a great feat for the dual wielder, but keep in mind that already this is putting us at 8th level, and there is a good chance that you would rather spend your 8th level to just up your dexterity by 2 to max it out at 20. And then from there, it might even be more of a challenge to pick Defensive Duelist because you may want to up your charisma to kind of help out with the aura and all of the saving throws and everything like that. So it's tough to fit Defensive Duelist in there, but it is the other feat I would consider for this build.
As a shield bearer, we're going to grab the Shield Master feat, which is great because it's kind of shield slam you can just do as part of your main action. So it's not fighting with your bonus action. Sentinel makes you very protective of your allies. And Heavy Armor Master, if you've got the feats to spare, is a great way to continue to protect yourself. The Shield Bearer is great because basically most of the feats that you have here are happening as part of your action or as part of your reaction, which means that your bonus action is always open there to use Smite on one of your attacks. It's very straightforward, great defensive build. With the Shield Bearer for your fighting style feat, you might want to go with Duelist for the bonus damage on your main hand attack, or I like just getting the +1 AC fighting style.
Yeah. For the two-hander, very simple. You just want Great Weapon Master. There is a chance, depending on the two-handed weapon that you're looking at, that you may want to look at Polearm Master. But Great Weapon Master is the one that you will definitely want.
Now, any paladin might also want to take Inspiring Leader, to boost their charisma and your allies are going to love you for all the temporary hit points that you give out. Paladins often concentrate on spells too, and so Warcaster can be very valuable for them because that's also going to be another charisma boost, boosting your aura, boosting your spellcasting, give you and make your concentration saves very reliable. If you really want to take your concentration and your constitution saving throws up to the next level, you could take Resilient Constitution. Again, as Kelly has alluded to, there are more feats here than you can take with your paladin. You get 4 feats, right? Plus your origin feat, and then you get your epic boon, and generally you want to take one of those epic boon feats instead of
don't take Defensive Duelist as your epic boon feat. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But that is the problem, is on top of all of these great feats that work really well on a paladin, regardless of the build you're choosing, you also are going to be trying to max out your strength or dex, depending on your build, and your charisma, while also not frowning upon getting an extra +1 or +2 into Constitution along the way.
Yeah.
So it is really, paladins are desperate for, they wish that they had the fighter feat option.
Paladin is definitely a class where like you wish you had like one more feat, but you don't. And so in some cases, depending on what you want to do, Paladin, there is an argument that maybe you don't max out one of your ability scores. And sometimes, if you have a very generous dungeon master, this might not be a problem for you because maybe your paladin finds a belt of giant strength or an amulet of health that boosts your con or your strength beyond what it can normally even be, or you get one of the tomes. But you can't count on magic items to solve that. Maybe you're rolling ability scores and you just roll 3 18s and you're laughing all the way to the bank, but we assume point buy. And so I do find that it is fine. Like for the dual wielder, for instance, with the dual wielder, you might be happy with 18 dex or 18 strength and just leave it there, get your charisma boosted up even further because that has a bigger impact for the rest of your party, and then keep it all quite balanced, right? For example, if you grab just dual wielder, get Inspiring Leader, get Warcaster, then your final choice is, well, do I want to take my charisma to 20? Do I want to take my dex to 20? Or do I want to grab another feat somewhere in there? There's no right option. all of these work, but it's about thinking about what do you want for your character.
Now we come to the spells. So paladins have a lot going on, as you can see. So let's talk about the spells. Now, as opposed to the full spellcasters where different spells kind of defined their playstyle, these spells apply to all playstyles. The playstyles are more about your melee combat options. Spells, these are the options that we like for any paladin. So starting at first level, I think that the obvious choice here, one of my favorite spells in the game, especially probably in my top 3 first level spells in the game, is Bless.
Oh yeah.
Bless allows you to pick a number of party members, and you can upcast it to pick more party members, and they get to add a d4 to all of their attack rolls and saving throws. Keep in mind that Bless is good forever. D4 isn't a lot, but an extra 2 or 3 can actually change a bunch of rolls. And especially combined with your Aura of Protection, if you bless your party and have Aura of Protection going, there's not a whole lot that can stop you.
Yeah, indeed. Bless is great because you can also bless yourself too, right? Which is going to give you an accuracy boost and a saving throw boost. Divine Favor is the other gem at first level. Divine Favor might seem innocuous at first. It's a bonus action to cast. It adds a d4 radiant damage to all of your attacks, but you don't have to concentrate on it, which means that you can have Bless and Divine Favor active at the same time, adding d4 to your attack rolls and your damage rolls. If you're a dual wielder, starting to see how this is all going to stack up here.
Yeah, d4 isn't much, but 4d4 is something.
Yeah, that is something. 4d4, straight up, for a dual wielder, 4d4 from one spell, but that's on every attack that you're making. That's more than a single smite. Over the course of several turns, that little d4 adds up to way more than what you would get from a single smite. That said, sometimes you do need to still smite someone, and sometimes in particular, you would like to defenestrate them by thunderously smiting them out a window. I love Thunderous Smite. I think that it is awesome for every character to have some sort of move that pushes an enemy in their back pocket. You never know when the villain is going to get a little bit too close to a cliff. And so I just think that having Thunderous Smite is one of those things that, like, you'll take it and then your dungeon master will forget that you have it.
You won't use it for like 8 game sessions.
And then it wins the battle.
And then the DM puts their enemy too close to the cliff and you Thunder Smite and win the combat account.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
At second level, we're going to kick things off with Aid. Very important thing to note about Aid. Aid increases your hit point maximum. At second level, it's only increasing it by 5, but 5 is still something. And then you can upcast Aid to basically increase it by 5 for every spell slot that you use above second level. What's very important here is increasing your hit point maximum is not the same as adding temporary hit points, and you can do both of those things. So if you are a paladin who takes Inspiring Leader, you can cast Aid on your party and give an inspiring speech, and now their hit point maximum is increased, and they gain temporary hit points on top of that.
Super sweet.
So this is a great protective spell. May not seem like a lot, but 5 hit points for your whole party can go a long way, and at higher levels, 10, 15, or 20 hit points for your whole party is nothing to laugh at.
Yeah. Now, other useful second level spells that you might want to grab here include Magic Weapon. If you don't have a Magic Weapon already, Magic Weapon is a non-concentration spell that turns one of your existing weapons into a magic weapon for an ongoing duration. So it's a great spell to cast outside of combat to bolster one of your weapons. Also outside of combat, if you want to play the Interrogator or the Inquisitor, you might want to bring Zone of Truth. This can be a pretty nasty spell for social situations and for getting the truth out of your enemies. It's a handy thing to have in there. Lesser Restoration can also be good to bring a little bit more support to your party.
At third level, we have Aura Vitality. Keep in mind, again, Aura Vitality is a spell that creates an aura. Creatures in the aura can replenish hit points. But Aura Vitality also can be used outside of combat, which essentially, as long as you have enough time to sit there and have everybody sit in the aura, you can kind of just divvy out those hit points and heal everybody back up. Yeah. On top of that, we do get another Smite spell. So Blinding Smite. Blinding Smite, as the name implies, when you smite with it, you also blind the target. And a blinded target means that you have advantage on attacks against them, and they have disadvantage on attacks against you. It's a great condition to apply to an enemy.
Dispel Magic can be a useful tool to have in your back pocket if you're fighting spellcasters to shut down their spells. And Revivify can be handy for emergencies when one of your party members dies. I think that packing it is just a useful thing, especially if no one else in the party can bring the dead back. And if you do have a lot of other martial combatants in your party, you might want to consider Crusader's Mantle. The Crusader's Mantle is concentration based, but it's like Divine Favor, but it works for you and allies within its range. So if you are in a party where, your paladin maybe is going the sword and shield route, but you're in a party with, say, a monk or a dual-wielding fighter or any other sort of martial class, or maybe you've got another party member who likes using summons, Crusader's Mantle can actually bring a lot of damage to the field in the right circumstances. It's one of those great teamwork spells.
At 4th level, we have Banishment, which is just a great tool to get rid of extraplanar entities and remove them from the battlefield. And you can win encounters with Banishment. We also have another smite, which is Staggering Smite. Staggering Smite will stun your enemy, and there's nothing better than that. So Staggering Smite is our 4th level smite option. And I still think between Staggering Smite, Blinding Smite, and Thunderous Smite,
it's a nice package.
It's a nice package.
Yeah. But the apex is probably Banishing Smite. Why have to choose between banishing your enemies and smiting your enemies when you can do both at the same time?
Really, for the 5th level spells, there's not a lot of bad choices here. We also have Circle of Power, which is a great option, Destructive Wave, which I love, and Summon Celestial. If you feel like you don't have enough people on the battlefield and you need some more firepower, summon an angel to fight with you. Angel Friend.
These are high-level spells. Circle of Power adds advantage on saving throws. And so if you are in a situation where your party is weathering the storm of like a lich's barrage of spells, Circle of Power combined with your aura is basically going to shut down all of that. Yeah. It's really good as a defensive move. Destructive Wave is a great way to just damage a ton of enemies in an AoE, although I do think the best bang for your buck for the 5th level slot is Summon Celestial.
Summon Celestial, because again, we're looking for those spells that have high impact and can last. I think that choosing what you're going to concentrate on as a paladin is one of the most important questions. You have your smites that you can throw in there beyond that. But if you're going to concentrate on something, the question always comes up, is it going to be Bless? Is it going to be Celestial? Is it going to be Banishment? And so knowing what you want to concentrate on is important. And at 5th level, Bless still might be a great choice.
Yeah.
But Summon Celestial might be the better choice. You'll have to decide that.
Okay. So with all those spells, feats, weapons, paladins get it all. And they get some awesome subclasses. So let's take a look at what they are. In general, the way that most paladin subclasses work is you get a bunch of extra spells prepared that are always prepared as long as you have access to that level of spell. You get some passive features, and you get a channel divinity option. So the first one up on the list is the Oath of Devotion Paladin. This is your classic like paladin swearing an oath to usually a deity. And this one is very much your protector type paladin build.
You get some decent spells like Aid and Zone of Truth being added directly on there, as well as Dispel Magic. But on top of that, you get a lot of sort of augmentations to your attacks and weapons. Your Channel Divinity option allows you to imbue your weapon with magical energy that allows you to add your Charisma mod to attack rolls with the weapon, and it now deals radiant damage.
Yeah, because it applies to one weapon, this option is better, makes the Oath of Devotion better for characters that are going to be doing sword and board or a two-handed weapon, because with dual wielders, it doesn't apply to both your weapons. It's also going to augment your aura of protection by making all your allies in the aura immune to charm, which is great because your aura is now providing charm and fear immunity. And All the Paladin subclasses have a very cool level 20 capstone power. In the case of the Oath of Devotion, it's actually going to be causing a bunch of radiant damage to go out when you activate it.
The Oath of Glory is an athletic paladin that is good at inspiring their allies. They gain bonuses to things like their speed, as well as having spells like haste on their spell list. So they're the athletes. They can run really far and really fast and get their party to run along with them.
Yeah, they get a cool ability that whenever they cast Divine Smite, they can channel Divinity to grant their allies temporary hit points or themselves, which can make them pretty beefy. Their spell list has a lot of a couple gems on it, in particular things like enhance ability, and they get things that are going to improve their athletics and acrobatics as well. Their kind of level 20 capstone feature basically allows them to turn missed attacks into hits instead, which is pretty impressive.
Moving on to the Oath of the Ancients. This is a paladin who swears their oath to older gods, and is a little bit has a touch of druid, I would say, in them. They're more nature based. The artwork in the book is beautiful. I love the depiction of the sort of nature paladin, and they get a lot of nature themed abilities, including a channel divinity that allows you to sprout vines and entangle your foes. Their spell list includes a lot of druidic spells like speak with animals, moonbeam, plant growth, and other sort of nature-y sort of things.
They also get Ensnaring Strike for more entangling, and they get the great Teleport Misty Step.
They get an ability to augment their aura by giving resistance to necrotic, psychic, and radiant damage, which, when they come up, are pretty brutal, so nice to have that.
And their Elder Champion capstone feature lets them regenerate their hit points, and as well, it lets them cast their spells as bonus actions and gives enemies in their aura disadvantage on saves against their spells and channel divinity effects.
Now, if you're just a really angry paladin and your oath is to seeking revenge on your enemies, then you might like the Oath of Vengeance. The Oath of Vengeance has a great spell list that includes Hunter's Mark and Misty Step, Haste, as well as Banishment and Hold Monster and Scrying.
And Dimension.
It's a great spell list.
The key feature here is the Vowed Enmity, that when you attack, you can simply declare to gain advantage on attacks against that creature for 1 minute. And if they die, you get to move it to somebody else. So the Oath of Vengeance, basically with its Vowed Enmity, is easily giving themselves advantage on every attack, which combined with Hunter's Mark as well as Divine Favor makes this an amazing archetype for dual-wielding damage dealers.
Their level 20 capstone feature, Avenging Angel, cool name, allows them to gain a fly speed of 60 feet. And when enemies are within their aura, they have to make a wisdom save or become frightened. So now you're a flying, terrifying Angel of Vengeance.
So finally, when we look at role-playing a paladin, although the various subclasses give us an idea of what our oath might be, I do find that one of the first things that is great to do with your paladin is write out your oath. What is it? Who or what did you swear your oath towards? Was it a deity, a ruler, a person, an ideal, a cause? And why do you have this connection? What does it mean to your character?
I think it's really valuable to say that in modern era D&D, not every paladin needs to be sworn to the gods. In previous renditions of subclasses that we've seen, there was like Oath of the Crown, which was swearing your oath to royalty. And I think even between these four oaths, you don't have to swear them to a god. Your Oath of Devotion could be the devotion to a leader or a ruler or your community, and you're devoted to protecting them. There's a lot of ways that your oath could come to light, and it doesn't need to be a religious oath. It could just be an oath that is a tradition. Mm-hmm. So think about what that oath means.
Many paladins are committed to high ideals, things like justice, things like empathy, ideas of protecting the innocent, defending the weak, or punishing evildoers. Your oath can encapsulate what these values are that your paladin swears to uphold, like a code of conduct, what is expected of you, how you're going to behave in certain situations. And I think that one of the things to embrace with a paladin is thinking about the ways that your oath is going to challenge your character, because sometimes an oath demands that you do something that is maybe not convenient. For example, if you are an Oath of Vengeance paladin, maybe you are committed to punishing evildoers and making sure that they receive the right punishment that justice demands. And maybe you're in a situation where one of the enemies that you've just defeated, they surrender to you and they offer you, hey, I'll give you information, I'll give you a secret, I'll give you something or reward you if you let me go. But your oath says, no, punish the wicked.
Judge Dredd is a great vengeance paladin.
Yeah.
And if you watch the Dredd movie,
right,
just use that as a template for your vengeance paladin.
Or you could go completely opposite. Maybe your oath is founded on mercy. Maybe it is founded on redemption. And your paladin is committed to the idea that, like, if someone surrenders to you, you will always offer them mercy. You will always offer them the chance at rehabilitation. And so it can go either way.
I think that it's nice to work with your DM about what parts of the oath you really want to bring to life. Even if you're picking one of these 4 subclasses, there are so many different ways you could imagine that oath taking shape. And so plan that out with your DM. Mm-hmm. And along with that, I like to think of what are the sayings and passages that maybe are passed down through that oath? Are there prayers, passages, battle cries, sort of anything that sticks out to you? A lot of handbooks will have like quotes that you might read out or say to remind yourself of what your oath is. And for that matter, a lot of these paladins that swear oaths are often part of an order. So are you part of a knightly order? Are you a military unit? I even think city guard make great paladins, because a lot of city guards, when they're chosen to become a city guard, they end up having to swear some sort of oath of like, do you vow to protect this city? Do you vow to give your life to protect the people in it? That's an oath. So perhaps you're a city guard that now gets sent out on a bigger quest. There are a lot of humble or large scale ways that your order or your oath could come into play.
Yeah, and ultimately, like, your oath comes down to, do you see yourself as a protector, an instrument of justice, or a vessel of retribution? Like, what does your oath forge you into?
And as always, how did you meet your adventuring companions? They may not be paladins of the same knightly order as you. So what is it about this group of people that has you perhaps joining their ranks to fulfill your oath and your knightly duty?
And though paladins might have you believe otherwise, they're not always perfect people. Do you have any fears, flaws, vices, or dark secrets along the way? Perhaps I think a great archetype for many paladins is the idea of the reformed villain. Maybe your paladin comes from a very dark past. Maybe they weren't always a good person, and they saw the light, and they have reformed themselves. But even though they have changed, their old life hasn't forgotten them.
The Night's Watch from Game of Thrones is 100% paladins. They are sworn into the ranks of this order. They have to swear an oath when they join, but they're all villains and scoundrels who are sent to the wall. So that's another take on a paladin that's interesting.
And I think that's an interesting way. Like, for example, if you wanted to play a paladin with like a criminal background or a charlatan background, the emphasis there is on background. Maybe your character was a charlatan, and that's why they have these skills. But they became a paladin and started their adventuring life, and they're trying to get away from that. But you still have your skills from your old life, even though you're trying to put it away, right?
Yeah.
And that could also be the changeover. For example, maybe if you chose noble for your paladin's background, which is another viable choice. Maybe your paladin is trying to get away from that life. They don't like, they come from a family that had expectations of them, but they have different ideals and things that they want to embody that separate them from their family in that respect, right? Because like the criminal background is another background that I think can work for the dexterity based build, right? Noble can work as well for the strength based build. And so maybe you've transformed. Like the act of becoming a paladin, swearing an oath, that kind of is a transformative thing. And so how does that haunt you or affect you? Or maybe you have things that you have to make amends for.
I think that regardless, there's actually a lot of archetypes in popular culture and media that you can draw on for paladins. Any character that you've ever seen swear an oath to protect somebody or make a promise. Even Samwise Gamgee has been regarded sometimes as a paladin because he made a promise to protect Frodo all the way through, and he's going to keep it. And that to me is an oath. He's sort of the, I guess, the gardener paladin, but it's beautiful the way that you can actually see this come to light in so many different places. And it doesn't always need to be the knight in shining armor, although there are a magnitude of options there as well.
Yeah, like there's always the question of like, I know we like to discuss like what alignment is Batman, but also we can discuss what class is Batman, because, you know, we've talked about previously, like Batman mechanically is very monk-like, but in terms of his ideals as the Dark Knight, he is also very vengeance paladin, but with certain caveats to that, right? Like he is still an instrument of justice, but he doesn't kill, right? So all of those elements can yield an interesting, although Batman will brutalize people.
Yeah, he doesn't kill. Although maybe your vengeance paladin doesn't kill. He just chops people in half. They're probably dead.
Non-lethally. Non-lethally chopped in half.
That's their saying as they cut through you. Non-lethal.
Yeah.
Non-lethal bisection. Great. You did it,
That's
Batman.
a great... That is a great way to declare a divine smite. Non-lethal bisection.
Yeah. So Batman is a paladin too.
Yeah.
There are so many ways that you can imagine a paladin, and we hope that this video has helped you get started on imagining your paladin. Tell us how excited you are to play a paladin and what oath you might swear and what shape your paladin might take in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here, please consider joining our Patreon. The links are down below.
And if you want to see us bisecting non-lethally our foes, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. All the previous episodes are right up over here.
And we got plenty more class guides for all the 5th edition 2024 classes right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time
in the dungeon.